Hi there. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Arthritis Life podcast, where we share arthritis life stories and tips for thriving with autoimmune arthritis. My name is Cheryl Crow, and I am passionate about helping people navigate real life with arthritis beyond joint pain. I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years, and I'm also a mom, occupational therapist, video creator, support group leader, and I created the Room to Thrive self-management program. I am so excited to help you live a more empowered life with arthritis. We're going to cover everything from kitchen life hacks to navigating the healthcare system to coping with friends who just don't get it. Seriously, no topic is going to be off limits on this podcast. My interviewees and I share our honest stories of how chronic illness affects our lives. This includes discussions about mental health, sex, shame, pregnancy, body image, advocacy, self-acceptance, and so much more. You'll hear stories from all ends of the spectrum, from a person who's living in medicated remission from psoriatic arthritis to somebody living with severe mobility restrictions and severe pain from rheumatoid arthritis. You'll hear how people manage their conditions in different ways, like medications, mindfulness, movement, social support, work accommodations, and so much more. You'll also hear from rheumatology experts who just get it. We'll dive deep into the science behind chronic pain and what's the latest evidence for lifestyle changes that can help you thrive with arthritis, including exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress reduction, and more. This is your chance to sit down and chat with a friend who's been there. Ready to figure out how to manage your arthritis life? Let's get started. I am so excited here today to have Amber Connell. Welcome to the Arthritis Podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to see you in real time. We're social media friends and Room to Thrive friends.
Yes.
And just to get us started, can you let the audience know, where do you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Amber and I use she and her pronouns. I am outside of Philly. I've been a Philly kid my entire life. And my relationship to arthritis is that about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. I have two family members, my mom and my grandpa, who have, my grandpa had and my mom has rheumatoid arthritis. And we do also have a couple other autoimmune diseases, specifically Crohn's disease, that also impacts joints that runs through our family.
Yeah, and that's really common. And I know that we've had on the podcast, I've had researchers from like Benaroya Research Institute in Seattle trying to study like what is this familial, inherited pattern. But yeah, I would love to delve more into your diagnosis journey, or as it often is a saga, but sometimes it's not if you have family members. Sometimes you got to get fast tracked. So what were your first symptoms and what was your diagnosis process like?
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm still in the middle of that saga because things keep changing as we get one thing addressed. We find others that we have to also take care of. Um, Initially, my first symptom was, well, the first symptom I realized is autoimmune was a lot of abdominal pain, stomach pain. I would feel really full and bloated after I would eat, and I would have all sorts of tummy troubles when I would start to go to the bathroom. Um, if I look back farther in my life, I've also always been prone to rashes that we didn't quite know what they were. We assumed I was allergic to most things, scents, fragrances, whatever. So I eliminated those throughout most of my life. Um, and then when I was a kid, I started with joint pain. So if we look back, we can definitely see it. But I didn't actually get diagnosed until around 2020. I had had a major injury and surgery on my knee. I tore my ACL and my meniscus, both my meniscus, in 2015, 2016, around there somewhere. And after recovery from that, I really started to notice more symptoms. And then I went down the kind of rabbit hole of specialists. And now we've basically settled on my treatment is predominantly for psoriatic arthritis, but it does also alleviate some of the stomach issues that come along with Crohn's, which I'm not officially diagnosed with
Mhm.
because I wasn't sick enough for that. I didn't have enough damage to my
Mm.
colon. But because they're interrelated, my treatment does work for both. Yay.
Yeah. No, and that's so I should, I spoke too soon saying maybe your diagnosis was fast track because you have a family history. No, it's hardly ever so simple. And yeah, I mean, I really relate to your experience with GI symptoms and I without knowing the relationship between things like Crohn's and inflammatory arthritis is like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. I never in a million years would have connected like stomach issues might be related to a joint condition, right? Like that's just
Yeah.
shocking before you know.
And interestingly, for my mom nowadays with her treatments, when she's due for a treatment, the symptoms that she actually notices the most are her joint symptoms, even
Mm.
more than her stomach symptoms flaring. So, for anybody out there listening, like this stuff, I always say, autoimmune diseases, just like our mental health, it's buy one, get two free. It always comes with stuff you might not be expecting. And sometimes things that might seem like a little annoyance or whatever can be connected. I know a
Yes.
lot, I've met a lot of folks recently who, with their autoimmune stuff, have had eye things that are just more complicated. And you wouldn't know that that's something to look out for until you're in the process of all this.
100%. Everything is so interrelated. And I love that you mentioned it's the same with mental health.
Oh,
Buy
yeah.
one, get two free. And actually, I want to jump ahead because I have a little order that I ask these questions in, but sometimes I just go with the flow of conversation. And I,
Cool.
I would love to hear more about, your work as a mental health professional. And, I think okay, let's start with that. How, what do you do as your job?
Mhm.
And then we're going to talk about kind of like how that can help, what your perspectives are on helping other people with chronic illnesses.
Yeah. So, I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed professional. Bleh. All right, we'll edit that.
That's
I'm a
okay.
licensed professional counselor in Pennsylvania. I graduated grad school in about 2010, so I've been coming up on about 15 years in the field working with folks. Predominantly, my career has focused on working with queer and trans folks, as well as lots of families, people who are neurodivergent, kiddos and their families, learning strategies and management. And then as I went through the process of getting my diagnosis, quite a few of my clients that I still see to this day have been on that journey with me. They've seen me come to the office in my clear liquid diets. I wore a backpack for an endoscopy, a capsule endoscopy one time. And thankfully, everybody I work with is so very, very flexible and wonderful. Um, the thing that I think so many of us don't like to admit is that we're probably more stressed out than we think we are.
Yeah.
Um, I think we all try to do too much. Um, and that can be a really big trigger factor for a lot of folks. Being overworked, stressed out, not having enough time to rest and rejuvenate with our families, with our friends. Um, that really takes a toll on our body. And if you're already running a little bit below baseline because you've got an autoimmune disease, it can make it that much more difficult to get out of a flare if one happens. So as my career has evolved, I've actually become uh, intertwined, basically working with folks who are also chronically ill. And I think that's because I approach my practice very transparently, and I like to let people know, as relevant what's going on for me, if it'll impact or update treatment in any way. And I think that that's actually been really attractive to a lot of people because in this life, dealing with autoimmune diseases, dealing with chronic health, pain, whatever, it can feel extremely isolating, even if you have a great support network and people who get it. It can just still feel really isolating. And having a therapist or someone with some shared lived experiences can really help. So I think it's actually, in a way, helped me connect with a lot more of my clients, um, because mental health and physical health are just so intertwined.
That's such a poignant point. Actually, you made numerous poignant points there.
Sorry.
But yeah, I remember thinking, um, I, I personally didn't go to a therapist until my son was about almost a year old, and I went because of postpartum mood disruption, I call it, because it didn't feel like depression to me. Anyway, long story short, I ended up, it's like I went to therapy for postpartum mood unhappiness. And then I stayed to unpack all the chronic illness stuff. And I remember saying to her, I wish I had gone earlier. Like many people, I'm sure you hear that every day. But also, I thought one of the reasons I didn't go earlier is because, like you said, you feel isolated, even if you have a great support network. I kept thinking, well, I shouldn't go to therapy because I have all these great support people in my life. Like I don't deserve it in some weird way. Not that I'm not worthy, but like, isn't therapy for people that like don't have anyone to talk to? I have like a million people to talk to, but it's a different relationship with a therapist, right?
Yeah, I go to therapy. I tell my therapist all the time. This is where I get to cry about it, and she gets to hear all the thoughts that sometimes I don't want to tell my friends, or I just don't feel like talking about when, I'm out on a Saturday. Um, and one of the things that's really helped me engaging in therapy has been that I can fast track how I talk about stuff. It's helped me get a better understanding of what some of my needs are from my support network, and I can talk to them more clearly and I guess eloquently about like what I might need or when things are flaring instead of it just being, oh, I don't feel well. I can talk more specifically, which has been really helpful.
I love that. And I think one of the things that surprised me the most about the the impact of therapy for me was that I had a lot of really wonderful, loving people in my life, but none of them have a completely like objective outsider point of view. They all know you from. I'm saying this. I know you already know this, but for the people listening, the
Yeah.
people who are on the fence about therapy, I think in it almost every episode, therapy comes up, and I would love to help reduce the stigma against going to where people don't feel like they should go to therapy or for whatever reason. And I think like having that objective outsider's point of view, they can just casually, the therapist can point out things or connect dots that you never would if you're like inside the painting, right, of your
Yeah,
life. Like you're in it versus the other person's like looking at like the gallery and being like, oh, that kind of, I wonder if that relates to that, And so I think,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I think the second thing I wanted to follow up on is just the importance of representation in our health providers of people with chronic illnesses. Like you said, a lot of people they want, and I've heard this on the podcast or heard it in the support group I run. People will ask me, do you know anyone in my city who has chronic illness who's a therapist? Because it can feel like it's really hard to they say if you don't get it till you get it, right? You
Yeah.
don't, yeah. um and so if anyone, is there any good way people can find a therapist who specializes in chronic illness or who has the lived experience?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Pennsylvania, I'll do a shout out for myself and
Oh my gosh, of
a,
course.
a couple of my interns. I actually have a few folks who work with me, who I supervise that also are living with chronic illnesses, and they're amazing therapists as well. If you were to look on some of the directories, the biggest one that you'll probably find the most amount of success with is Inclusive Therapists. Inclusive Therapist is a newer therapist directory. You can sort by all sorts of topics. If you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, if you'd like a therapist that matches your identity in those realms. If you're an Indigenous person or a person of color, you can search for therapists who match that. It can be broken down therapists who specialize in or who also have lived experience as neurodivergent or folks with chronic illnesses. So they've got the broadest search tools, I would say. There are other directories like Therapy Den, Psychology Today. And for folks who have insurance and want to go through their insurance, or even your doctor's offices, I recently started working with a new provider, and throughout their offices, they had flyers of multiple support groups that their practice, as well as a local therapy practice, are co-sponsoring. So you just have to get creative, do a little online searching, and don't be afraid to ask the providers that you already see. Every time I go to a doctor's office for an appointment, I also think of it as a little bit of networking. I wish we could maybe get copays as a write-off. That would be great.
Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Um, but it's an opportunity for me to let other providers know, hey, we exist, we're there, and your patients are looking for people who share some lived experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I keep saying that word a lot. It's a little bit of a buzzword in the therapy world. I'll just kind of give a little bit of background there.
Hmm.
This has been studied for decades. I mean, at least 50, 60 years. They've studied what has the biggest impact on therapy outcomes. And what we have found is that the research shows that as long as there is some sort of shared lived experience. So, obviously, I couldn't be your therapist. We know each other in a different capacity. But the fact that we're both women, or that we both have chronic illnesses, or we both wear glasses. Um, Maybe you're a really sporty person and you'd like a therapist who's also into sports. Or if you're into theater and you'd like a therapist who shares that interest with you. So, having some sort of connection with your therapist outside the therapy actually helps the therapy work better. Um,
Wow.
so for
That's
therapists out there
amazing.
listening and for potential clients, you know, living your life as transparently as is safe as possible for you. I know not everybody can dive into that the way I have safety for.
Mm.
Um, but if you're able to, it's really good for everybody, for business practice and for the support that we can provide as therapists and as clients. If you find somebody who has a little bit of an understanding, it's just one less person you have to educate, which is
Yeah.
a large part of this process for a lot of us.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember when I was in occupational therapy school, because we also call it like a therapeutic alliance, like a
Yep.
connection. Like human beings are never going to be able to just connect on like, or in my opinion, there's never going to be this complete like objectivity, or a sense of like I am a robot and like I'm not treating, whatever. So point being, like in occupational therapy school, we talk a lot about therapeutic use of self and how like the self-disclosure, you in the role of the therapist, at least this is just what I was taught. I'm curious if you had the same thing or same outlook, is should always be in the service of the patient, right? And I mean, yeah,
Yep.
it seems obvious. Like that I'm not just going to talk about, how I have to replace the shower head in my shower and like randomly talk about my life. Like, doesn't have anything to do with what the client's talking about, but that you bring in your experiences. In the olden days, it was like, oh, you don't tell your client or your patient anything about yourself. And like, you're just like a blank canvas. And
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like that's really humane, but I guess I'm sure there's some practitioners who prefer that. That's just the way they practice. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. When I was like coming up as a therapist, that's how we were taught as well. You're very blank
Ah,
slate. Um, what some people call the like smile and nod therapists.
yeah.
And I've come to find for the patients that I work the best with, that style is not what they gravitate towards. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's a very individual thing per client, per therapist, the toolbox that you use, the different theories we all come from. I tell everybody it's like lasagna. If I say lasagna, every single person in the world kind of knows what that is, right? It's a dish. They've all
Hmm.
got pasta, they've all got some sort of sauce, and they usually all have some sort of cheese. And they're usually delicious. But if I make lasagna, it's probably going to be different than how you make lasagna. Mine
Right.
might have veggies, yours might have meat, somebody else might have a white sauce or a red sauce. I might use vegan cheese, you might use
Hmm.
Parmesan. Who knows? So everybody puts their own little twist on it, but at the core, it's the same thing. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind
I love
of
that.
that's the therapy experience too. At the core, it's the same, but each therapist and each client is going to have their own unique spin.
I love that. And that's why you'll often hear, for those of you, again, I'm speaking to the people on the therapy fence right now, or who maybe who talked to one therapist and had a bad experience, that
Yeah.
it's like dating too, where you have usually not usually, often you have to talk to a couple different therapists till you find a good fit. Now, that wasn't the case for me. I got very lucky. But even my first therapist that I went to, eventually there was one issue, my claustrophobia, that everything else had kind of had a very nice trajectory of, of course there's ups and downs, especially with chronic illness, but it was like, I built a toolbox and like, I'm checking with her about it and things are going in the right direction. But we had really stalled on the claustrophobia, like the tools that she had given me, and she tried, to her credit, lots of different things. And it was like, I really was not making progress on that goal. And she was like, I really think it's time, like that I would like to refer you to somebody who really specializes in phobias, and that, that has maybe a wider toolbox or a more specialized experience than I do. And that's what then the therapist number 2 led me through like exposure therapy. And that was what really, really helped. The way he did it helped. And
Yep.
so, that's very common to have to talk to multiple, and maybe there's different therapists that work for different seasons of your life too, so don't give up if the first one didn't work for you.
Absolutely. I tell people that too. Like, there is nothing wrong with give it 2 or 3 sessions at least with, each person that you're trying out. The beginning isn't really the meat of the therapy. It's getting to know one another. If you
Yeah.
instantly get like ooh, I don't think this is going to work, trust your gut. And that's okay. We're taught how to not take that stuff personally. It doesn't hurt our feelings.
Mhm.
It's all part of the game. And I know that I'm not the best therapist for everybody. And that's actually a really freeing thought in this process, to let yourself get to know someone and let them get to know you and be like, hey, do I want this person kind of poking around in my brain a little bit? Because that's what we do.
Yeah.
And I also really like how you said sometimes we need different folks for different approaches or seasons. Um, I have done that myself. I've referred clients to colleagues for a short period of time, sometimes for a long period of time. And, everybody out there listening, just know as therapists, when we see you connect with someone or be able to find the tool or strategy that works for you, we're overjoyed. So, as
Yeah.
much as it can be kind of sad or disappointing if we do have to quote unquote break up with someone or refer them
Oh,
out,
yeah. Yeah.
um, it's also just really exciting for us to see people start to thrive. So, don't ever be
Yeah.
afraid to approach that subject with your therapist and ask them if they know. They probably have a great colleague who they're good friends with who works very differently than them. Some of my best therapist friends and we don't work it all the same way, and that's what's really great about it.
It really is a fascinating, it is just a fascinating magic, alchemy of therapy. And I would love to hear, back to your personal journey, because what works for one person doesn't work for another. I talk about acceptance and commitment therapy all the time. And I always am like, I think it's the most helpful for most people, but it's I probably shouldn't say it like that, because again, it's going to be different for each person. But I would love, in your experience, like what are some of the, for whatever you're comfortable sharing, mental health kind of tools or approaches that have been helpful for you with managing your chronic illnesses? If you have ever felt completely lost or utterly alone while trying to navigate real life with rheumatic disease, listen up. I am here for you. I created an educational program to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. And it's called Room to Thrive. After earning a master's in occupational therapy and completing hundreds of hours of additional training, I created a step-by-step guide to help you truly thrive with rheumatic disease. This is the only program I know of that's designed to improve quality of life for people living with inflammatory, autoimmune forms of arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis, Sjogren's disease, and more. During the self-paced lessons, you'll learn how to manage pain and fatigue, cope with stress, navigate relationships, and continue doing the things that matter to you and bring you joy. The goal is really to help you improve your quality of life and learn how to thrive with your rheumatic disease right now, rather than waiting for a distant day when it might be cured or healed. I really created the down-to-earth, practical, heartfelt resource I wish I had had when I was first diagnosed at age 20. If you want even more in-depth support, you can join the 12-week Room to Thrive virtual support group, where you'll be surrounded by people who actually get what you're going through, people who will provide the encouragement, validation, and support that you deserve. Each group is expertly moderated, so you don't have to worry about the kind of misinformation that spreads like wildfire in the free-for-all social media groups. If you're on the fence, don't just take my word for it. Here's what Katie had to say in March 2023. I was lost and overwhelmed with my RA diagnosis. It felt overwhelming to know what to read, what to do, how to spend my energy trying to research on the internet. Room to Thrive did that for me. It's been like getting a crash course in my diagnosis along with a community who gets it. To see all the details, including the dates for the next support groups, go to the link in the show notes or bit.ly/thrive room with a capital T and capital R. You can also just email me anytime at info@myarthritislife.net. And don't delay if you're interested, because each group is capped at 16 people or less in order to make a small, intimate group atmosphere. Thanks so much for your time, and I can't wait to get started with the next groups. And I can't wait for those of you who are interested in the self-paced option to go ahead and join that at any time. Bye-bye for now.
Yeah. I am also a big fan of ACT. I am not, I'll just clarify this. I'm not very specifically trained in it. I get the training that a lot of us have gotten in grad school, where we're trained to be general practitioners and then we specialize over time. I'm actually a big systems person as well. And so that could be your family system. And it's not just the family you were born into, it can be your chosen family, spouses, people who have their own children. Um, and I just look at how all the different, I don't want to say the word systems again, but I don't have a better word for it.
Yeah.
All the different areas of our life work together in tandem. Um, think about health and mental health and our families and the world. I think of it like a clock. And if we take an old school analog clock, if we take the front off and we look at the inside, there's a whole bunch of gears and they're all different sizes and they all have to work in tandem. If one of those gears is spinning too fast, the clock's not going to tell time right. If one of those gears is spinning too slow, it's also not going to work right. And then all the others have to either work more or less to compensate and all those things. That's like all the different areas of our lives. We're not just patients. We're not just someone with an autoimmune disease. We are friends. We are family members, siblings, parents, partners. All of these identities are so important to who we are as people that an autoimmune disease, think of that clock, all these different things spinning. And then we have another clock that's our family or our work or all these things. And then an autoimmune disease is basically like chucking a bunch of peanut butter into the middle of that clock, right? Maybe one
Yes.
gear's spinning out of control now. Maybe one of them's too slow. And our work, whether it be through treatment or through mental health, is to get those gears back on the same page. That does not mean it's the page that they were on before. And
Wow.
that has been the crux of my own individual therapy work, as well as a lot of people I work with. Allowing ourselves the space to grieve that maybe our body doesn't look or work the same way that we knew it to, that our relationships with our family and friends do have to change. Um, a big one for me was Thanksgiving's coming up. My mom, like I'm sure everybody's going to say, makes the absolute best stuffing. However, she uses lots of onions in her stuffing. And over my journey, I've done a couple different elimination diets to try to see what else I could do to regulate symptoms. And I learned I'm allergic to onions. I wasn't as a kid. It wasn't anything. I shouldn't say allergic. I say allergic. It's what makes the most sense. But
You're reactive, maybe. I'm also
thank you.
garlic
That's
and onions. It's like the most just
yes.
tragic thing. And
It
yeah,
is because they're so
I grieve it
tasty.
daily. Yeah.
Um, and it actually took us a couple years to get on the same page where I could say, Mom, if you're gonna make stuffing for Thanksgiving, can you make me? She now makes me a little pan of my own that doesn't have the onions in it. It's still good, but I also, every now and then it's worth it to swipe a bite of the stuff we know we're not supposed to have
Yeah.
just to get that flavor, take a little bit of the extra preventative meds and we figure it out.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's
I
just
love
different.
it. Yeah, and that's been a huge like theme of all the podcasts. I like how you explain it with like the systems theory. You have a lot of metaphors, which is why it's not surprising that you like ACT or acceptance and commitment
Yeah.
therapy, because it uses a lot of metaphors too. But that yeah, you're like having a chronic illness is like throwing peanut butter into the gears of the clock of your life, and exactly like you said, you're not just gonna search for the solution to get the clock back to exactly how it was before. You have to then kind of create this new normal. And I think that allowing yourself, I think one of the hardest things, and I don't know how you help your clients do this, or I forget how my own therapist has helped me do this, is like giving yourself permission to grieve and feel your feelings while also gently nudging the person. And this is what we do in the Room to Thrive groups and program too, is like gently nudging people to embrace the new normal, while also saying it's you don't embracing the new normal doesn't mean that you love the new normal as much as your old normal. You don't
Hmm.
have to gaslight yourself into saying it's just as great. Like it might be a harder life, right? But we still have to adjust. Like, how do you do that?
Well,
You're like, it's
personally,
easy. I know.
no, not at all. It's not easy. Personally, the way I do that is sometimes we just have to take our own mental health days. I call it sometimes a goblin day. I have clients who call it a rot day. Whatever you want to call it, it's basically eat some junk food, stay in your jammies, pull the covers up over your head, cry if you have to, lean into music, lean into an audiobook, a favorite TV series, whatever your stuff is to just get through that day or so that you're really raw and vulnerable. And we have to let ourselves have those. If we don't, your body will make you feel those feelings at some point, and it will be much less in your control and much more unpleasant if you don't make room for it yourself. And to be perfectly honest, that's how I do the nudge with my clients. Um, I'm getting better at nudging myself. That's why we all need our own supports too. But, we just talk about how, we still have goals, we still have things to accomplish. Our lives are absolutely meaningful. It's just we have like a second full-time job having a chronic illness, and everybody's just got to figure out how to make room for it for themselves. Some folks do really well with lots of exercise. Some folks do really well digging into their work. Um, I like to read when I don't feel well, or binge silly TV with my husband and my friends, stuff like that.
Mhm. I love that. And I'm similar in that I don't find it hard to, even though I'm normally like kind of like a workaholic person, I don't find it hard to give myself permission to relax when, or like have a one of those days where I'm like watching the Great British Baking Show and then like salivating over all this like glutinous stuff I can't eat.
Oh,
But
yes.
anyway, I often hear from people with chronic illnesses that they find it hard to give themselves permission to have a jammy day, or like what are some ways that people can give themselves permission? Is it like just do it? No, I don't know.
Uh, yeah. For some people, the just do it might work, right? That this is part of your treatment plan is
Mm.
every third Saturday. I am telling you as your therapist, you're not allowed to get out of bed.
I love
Um,
that.
or sometimes I'll tell people, I'll be like, listen, order the Chipotle, order the cheese fries, right? Let yourself indulge a smidge so that you get that taste of it without having without winding up reinforcing the all or nothing. A lot of us do that, especially if we have dietary restrictions, especially if exercise is something that helps us. It's really easy to get hyper focused on what we need to cut out and not let ourselves do. That sometimes I think we forget that things like just hanging out at your house, watching TV with a friend, being cozy can be the best medicine, just laughing, having fun. Um, so really just, for the folks out there who just do it, this is part of the plan, schedule it for yourself. If that works, awesome. If you're somebody like me, I need my friends and family to kind of initiate some of those days. I had a friend I hung out with over the weekend, basically texted me, knew when I was having a little bit of a bad day, and said, plan for the weekend, blankets, cuddles, heating pad. We're gonna watch a show. Their cats jumped all over us. It was lovely and wonderful. We ate delicious ramen, and I had a nice, great day. I hung out with someone, and I got to relax and be really rested because I just showed up myself, and they knew I wasn't feeling great. So finding a trusted friend who can be almost like an unaccountability partner
I
or
love
accountability or an accountability partner for our rest. Like that's helpful too.
I love that. And I think that's been the case for me. I'm very like hypersocial person.
Same.
And I think another thing is like, and some people need more of a like cognitive like strategy or like logical strategy. I remember I again have been kind of like a sleep diva for a while, and I definitely protect my sleep. I mean, my mom was reminding me I was like that even in high school. Like friends would be like, "Do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "I have to sleep because I have a soccer game tomorrow," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so it wasn't even chronic illness related necessarily. I've just always known deeply that like sleep was a very core need of my body. But after having a chronic illness, it's been way more
Oh yeah.
necessary. And when I became aware of some of the research about how important sleep is, it's like that even makes it easier to justify, say, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is like just like food and water. Sleep is like a medical need. So sometimes you kind of throw that into the mix, be like, oh yeah, rest and sleep. Like this is how
Yeah.
humans need to rest our bodies sometimes. So yeah, sometimes we just need, and a lot of times I think you're right that we need someone else reminding us, a friend or a therapist. I think that's
Yeah.
beautiful. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is support groups.
Hmm.
So there's all kinds of groups out there. I mean, there's unofficial ones, kind of, or I call them unofficial ones, the ones on Facebook that are like a asynchronous kind of melting pot of a lot of people who have a similar diagnosis, but they're not necessarily like moderated by anyone with any kind of experience, with mental
Hmm.
health or anything. And then there's like really, really official support groups that are like in an inpatient psychiatry unit,
Hmm.
that makes other side of the spectrum that are like very highly organized. And then there's like all this in between. So what are your thoughts on support groups and experiences, whatever you would want to share from your experience in Room to Thrive as well?
Yeah. I love a good support group. So I'll do two shout outs. First is to Cheryl's group, Room to Thrive. I got to tell you, that group and y'all got me through a really tough time. 2023, when I was a member, was a really tough year. And I was at kind of a turning point, just not knowing what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with treatment. And the group was really, really helpful. To let everybody know the process of it, Cheryl is fantastic at psychoeducation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And really taking these big, broad medical concepts and breaking it down. And if you complete this group, you will leave literally with so much education. You could probably walk into your doctor's office and be able to maybe pinpoint something new that's helpful for you or something, a test you might like to try, because you break it down so well so that people can really understand what's happening for them and to them throughout this process. And it gives you better understanding of possible medications and things like that that you're taking. We have to become like mini experts on stuff because it's affecting our bodies. Like our body is the one currency that like we're gonna have for our whole lives, and we're the only
Yes.
ones who we can really count on to know it, right? You live in this body 24/7. You're the one that knows it. And so getting some of that extra education is really helpful. The other part of support groups that I really like are I do this for a living. I'm a therapist. I am also a hypersocial person. I've got people around me all the time, and I still felt like nobody understood. Um, Even my mom, who was diagnosed with, autoimmune diseases before I was born, because some of our stuff presents differently, I even felt like she didn't understand. And she probably understands the best out of anybody I know. So it was just really helpful to, quote, be in a room. And I say that with air quotes because we met virtually.
Yes, a virtual
Um,
room.
but to just be there and to be able to show up and, our group it was the group of, it winds up all the people that you need. I mean, we had teachers, we had doctors, we had myself and I think another therapist. And to just see these other folks who are like, oh, you're professionals, you're real life people, you're living your lives, and we can talk about, yeah, this thing really helped, but also it was a really big pain in the butt to get started with. Um, or I remember one group, I think a bunch of us were just lamenting over side effects that our doctors were like, yeah, you'll be fine to go to work. And meanwhile, we were like, really? Because I couldn't even make it to watch an episode of TV. I was so drowsy. So it was just also nice to have somebody who's been through the experiences without telling you what you should do, just get it. Like that shorthand almost that we developed, it happened really quickly. And the group was really awesome. As far as other groups and like unstructured things, I'm a big fan of that too. Um, Anything that gets people connected to other humans. Since the pandemic, a lot of our lives have moved online, and connecting is so much easier than ever. And I absolutely love it. If it weren't for telehealth and Zoom and remote, I wouldn't be able to work nearly as much as I do. So it's been absolutely wonderful. But I think a lot of us do forget that we're social creatures. We're not meant to live in isolation or by ourselves. Our brains and our bodies are designed to be in community with one another. And if you're somebody who's newer on a diagnosis journey, or even if you've been living with something for 25, 30 years, you might still be in a different stage of finding your community and finding your people who are going to get it. I'm now also social media friends with most of the people that were in our group.
Yeah.
And we check in on each other and we celebrate each other's wins. And
Mm,
there's some stuff I think that, we've talked about with each other that maybe folks haven't talked as in depth with their family members or their partners or their kids, just because it might be a little harder to have those conversations with someone not living it. So if
yeah.
people can find a quality support group, right? Folks that are in the same sort of journey space, maybe not the same area of journey, but just the same space if they've got similar motivations to you, um, or they're just folks that you can see yourself opening up to and allowing to get pushed a little bit from. It'll be really, really worth it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with the Room to Thrive group. It really is like from doing your own, you've facilitated groups before too, that the group dynamics are fascinating because they are unique to the individuals in that group, right?
Yes.
But typically in the room, it's to the point now, the Room to Thrive groups have been so great, honestly, like since 2020 when I started this, that I'm almost like, so when I went to I went to the rheumatology conference earlier this month, and certain people were like, oh, you got to scale this, you got to get it bigger so more people can take it. I'm almost scared to scale it to, because I'm like, what if the like magic is that people already, anyway, sorry, this is just me like rambling, but like point being, it's been so great that, and I think that part of it is that I don't market it like in any sort of official way other than like organic social media marketing the and to the podcast. And so part of me worries that like it might lose some of the magic if I kind of get like a broader audience, but I need to also just get rid of that fear, probably just in order to I want as many people as possible to be able to experience it. And I do think that there is a magic, when you get people together who have a shared experience. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
is.
I think I'm very much a believer in the both and
Mhm.
of, something can be both scary and exciting. Something can
Yeah,
be both good for us and hard to do. In fact, most
absolutely.
things in our life are more than one thing. We're very
So
multifaceted as
true.
humans. And if it were me, the cheerleader in me is like, yes, Cheryl, grow it, make it huge. Um, the therapist in me is also like, maybe there's something to that little thought in the back of your head or that little gut instinct. And
Mhm.
maybe there's an alternative, like a third path that just hasn't
Yeah.
revealed itself to you yet, that's somewhere in between making it like a global phenomenon, um, or the really kind of tiny organic what you have now. There's definitely somewhere in the middle that I think Room to Thrive or anybody else who's running a support
Yeah.
group or doing this education, you know, I think we're going to start to see lots and lots more um, interspecialty collaboration.
Yes.
So I think there's lots of room for everybody to grow, whether it be um, financially, professionally, whatever it might be, community wise, but also sticking to your roots and like trust your instincts and what works for you.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for the free advice.
You're welcome.
Yeah. No, it's so
Sometimes it's
true.
hard
And
to
I
turn
think
it
that,
off.
yeah, no, the first big step was in 2023 when I made the lecture part, so the educational part, all pre-recorded, because that
Yeah.
is infinitely scalable in the sense that you can take the Room to Thrive course by itself without the support, the live support group. You can just get those recordings and learn, the little tips and tricks, like I meant, not just little, but the tips and tricks and also the mental health coping tools. And then the support groups that's the part that, yeah, and there's plenty of groups that have scaled support groups, like Alcoholics Anonymous, or there's so many different
Yeah.
ways to look at it. But yeah, I think for now I also have to like just, yeah, for my own mental health, be like one thing at a time,
Yeah.
like I love how it's going so far. So and yeah, to anyone listening who's been part of the groups, it really is. I'm so grateful to each person who has, because it is like a co-created experience. Like,
Yeah.
you, Amber, being in the group changed the group for the better, right? Each person who's in the group makes it what it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, my initial thought with groups is just I'm just like a more the merrier person, but it's ended up being even more where I'm like I can help more people from an energy standpoint. For me, if I want to help like 60 people in 1 week, I could do that via 4 hours of
Right.
meetings, 15 people each, or I could do it like 60 hours, right? And it's like there's still a lot of hours that are prepping, but one-on-one is not as efficient as a group.
Yeah.
And it's also just a different experience. So anyway, but it's there is a magic, like we mentioned earlier, therapy. There is a complete magic and a necessity of one-on-one therapy. Not gonna take away from that
I
whatsoever.
th I think that, at different seasons in our life, and we get so much benefit. They're just different.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
groups a little more, you have a little less control, a little more unpredictable.
Yes.
Um, and you're getting into the real life, like those relationships are happening at the same time. People are trying stuff. So it's a little, I don't want to say messier, but like messier in the fun way, like when you're baking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Whereas, individual, yeah, it'll get messy. You'll get into your own stuff. And it's really, really helpful. For so many of us, though, I think they work really well in tandem.
Mhm.
And, I was actually able to take a step back and do a little bit less individual therapy during the group and then after. And then you
Okay.
could ramp back up. Like, again, the world is everybody's oyster. Like all
Yeah.
of these options are great. And if anybody's out there listening has any questions or concerns, Cheryl was really great. I reached out to her before I joined. I was honestly a little concerned just with how much education I do have around this, just because
Yeah.
I lived with my mom. She had Crohn's disease since before I was born. And I'm a therapist. So I was like, oh, I'm probably a terrible group member, is what I thought when I went into it, because I didn't want to be like, oh, I already know this stuff.
Mhm.
And, wreck a group dynamic. Um, but it didn't work out that way. It worked out that I think the universe gives us what we need. Everybody got what they needed out of it. And I think the way that group dynamics form and bond, um, it's a nice extra tool in the toolbox. Like,
Yeah.
I really love that analogy. I've used it even before I did Room to Thrive, but especially as I work with chronic illness folks, I talk about all the different things we have in our toolbox. Um, you mentioned cognitive coping, physical coping, medication, sleep. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of how big this toolbox could be.
Yeah, and I'm so similar to you in terms of like I'm just very conscientious about where I spend my time, and I would be feeling the same if I were you. Like, should I do this group, these weekly meetings for an hour because I'm like I already know this stuff kind of thing. But yeah, it's hard to put it into words. It's the experience. I think there is the experience of connecting to others. And one thing someone asked me once is like, well, what, do you have like one group for like especially for newly diagnosed versus people who've had it for a long time? And initially it's just like, I know, because I want the group I just didn't have like people knocking on the door being like, I want to take this group. I didn't have enough people to separate it like that. But I'm really glad I didn't, because what's ended up happening is there's people who come to the groups who've had it for 15 years, and there's people who've had it for 15 days. Like, I'm not kidding. There's been people who they just asked a friend of a friend and who listened to the podcast and like, you got to join Cheryl's group. It's open right now. Um, and that has ended up being so, because the person who's had it for 15 years, again, has a huge amount of knowledge. right? But there's the therapeutic benefit to them of sharing that knowledge with somebody who's new. You don't even, a lot of people have said, I don't even realize how much I knew until I was in a group with somebody who was brand new. And then also, the people who are brand new diagnosed often have even a fresher perspective, or maybe like they're not clinging to things that were like the normal standard of care like 15 years ago. Like a lot has changed in rheumatology. So sometimes, there's everyone's voice is important and contributes to the group. Whether, yeah, there's people who've been a therapist for a long time, like you, and then there's somebody who might be like from the business world, or like, I don't know, does like law. And sometimes they're able to have that distance of like, oh, well, what about this? What if you see it this way? So it's been really great having groups that are diverse in terms of, not as diverse as they could be in terms of gender, I will say. I've always tried, they're open to anyone, but it's usually, people who identify as female, but they're diverse in terms of age and type of inflammatory arthritis.
Yep.
So that's been really wonderful. But thank you. So back to your story. One last question before we go to the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and you've already explored this a little bit, but just in case there was something else you wanted to say on it, how has being a therapist affected your experience as a patient?
Oof.
Yeah.
Um, that's a tricky one. I think it makes me sometimes easier to treat because I'm really already in tune with tracking, charting, understanding my body, understanding how symptoms change over time. That comes really naturally to me, and I think it's enhanced by my job. But sometimes I think I think like any therapist, well, I don't know. I don't want to lump us all together, but most of us, we tend to be overthinkers. And I wonder if sometimes that makes me a harder patient because I have to work very hard to turn off my analytical mind and, just let things settle sometimes. Um, One of the things I know that it helped with is I very much don't like to do or don't like to start multiple treatments at one time because I like to
Mm,
know what is this doing? What effect is this having, both positive and negative, and what potential side effects am I having? Um, and so I like to go slow and steady, which works well with some of my providers, and some of my other folks are like, no, no, we got to do all these tests. We're going to do this right now. This is a big deal. Um, and I think the most important thing that has helped me is when you go through a diagnosis process, when you go through a treatment process or a change, you are going to get books of information just thrown at you. It's just so much information. And having the skills to be able to sort of take information in and process it and then react with my own thoughts and feelings. And that's a skill that I had to learn in grad school. This is not a normal human way of processing, right? We get information and we just react. That's what our bodies like to do. Um, so I'm able to have that extra little skill where I can take it in, process it intellectually, then react, and then process it again. Um, that's not a natural thing. That's a skill people have to learn. And if you don't have that, my then suggestion would be for every appointment, take video note or not video notes, take audio notes, take a regular notebook, write stuff down, bring a friend with you, or have somebody on the phone who's also, if somebody's not able to come with you, so that someone else can also hear what your doctor's saying. That way, if you have follow-up questions, you can start by going over all the information with your friend or family member and then go back to your doctor because we only get so much time with our providers. So
yeah.
I think I can be a bit of a pain to them because I I know more on the research level. Um, but it can be really helpful for me. I'm a little bit better able to digest.
I love it. And it's just like you said to me earlier, it's a both and, right? It's
Yep.
they're both existing. It's like I often say if someone's going to interview me for like a media outlet, I do love sharing my story, but I often joke like I'm like simultaneously the easiest and the hardest person to interview because the easy part, right, is that you don't have to draw me out. Like I have like 900 thoughts on every question you ask me. So that's good. Or, for them, they don't have to be like, pulling teeth to get information on me. But the hard part is that because my brain really sees like patterns and interconnections between things, I don't often give people a clear, straightforward soundbite for their article. Like
Yeah.
they're looking for a one sentence soundbite. And I'm like, it all starts with the meaning of life. And, to build an apple pie from scratch, we have to create the universe first and la, 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 la. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
At least you can
I'm
get to the point.
I'm pretty similar, obviously, as anybody listening can probably tell. Um, but I think again, it's the both end. This treatment is so nuanced. The symptoms are so nuanced, so individual for everybody.
Mhm.
Um, Really, my biggest takeaway that I've seen with myself is it's slow, it's long, and take the time to really get to know what works with your body. Um, if you're doing, learning about new dietary restrictions, jot your thoughts down a couple times a day. It doesn't have to be a big formal process. Just really checking in with yourself and acknowledging that you're the expert on your body and that your providers, your doctors, your therapist, physical therapist, whoever, they're your treatment team and you're a team member too.
So important. I mean, that's honestly, you're anticipating my next question, which was best words of wisdom for newly diagnosed patients. And that's great. I mean, is there anything you would add to that? Or did you have, yeah.
No, pretty much that. I mean, I
Okay.
would probably say follow Cheryl on Instagram at least.
Oh,
Um, and one thing I did between 2023 and 2024, I'm gonna take this a little roundabout, sorry,
no,
is I
please.
I really curated my social media. I am someone who, when I first was diagnosed, I wanted to do everything I could and be in control, and we're gonna do diet and exercise and yoga and breathing and all these things. Um, and it can be a quick rabbit hole to diet culture that way. And I didn't realize how negatively that would affect me. It didn't affect me negatively as a kid or a teenager. It actually wasn't until I was going through chronic illness that I had the negative effects of diet culture and social media and media. So I've really curated folks who meet potential clients or just other patients where they're at, who talk about all bodies being good and who talk about things like toolboxes rather than a one size fits all program. Um, and so that's what I would do. Like, trust my best words of wisdom for someone newly diagnosed is trust your instinct and trust your gut. You know your body and curate people around you who match your vibes and your energy about how you're going to tackle this. Obviously, we have to be open to suggestions and things from doctors and all that. They do have the expertise in the medicine. But again, just see it as a team.
I love that. And I mean, I'm really glad you mentioned about your experience with diet culture. It's one of the things I'm most diet culture and frankly like food phobia that is
Yes.
rampant in the social media communities around autoimmune diseases and it is definitely something I observed in my initial, experiences on social media, but because social media becomes like a very selective filter, the filters have gotten the algorithms have gotten very sophisticated over time. So because I'm not interested personally in a lot of the because it doesn't has not been what moves the needle for me and my body, the dietary interventions, and I'm just not interested in a restricted diet in general unless I like super, super have to. Which is
Yeah.
what I do with the low FODMAP diet base and for gastroparesis and everything. But long story short, for me, it's just, and I sometimes forget because my feed isn't a lot geared towards that how many people's is and that it comes up in the groups every single time. And I have this gigantic now caveat or disclaimer before we even talk about the role of nutrition in rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases, that there's a huge caveat about, orthorexia, which is
Yes.
an unhealthy fixation, right, on only eating clean or healthy foods. But that's a huge danger for those in the autoimmune community. And just what you said is so beautifully earlier too, that really instead of a restrictive mindset, to develop more of a focus on the foods or the choices in your life that are going to improve your quality of life, improve your symptoms versus stay away from these scary foods, like they're gonna make you feel
Yep.
worse. Yeah. So I just
And we are all going to have some sort of restrictions because of these diseases.
yeah.
That's part of it. But it doesn't have to be the only thing we focus on.
Yes. Health, yeah, having a healthy, quote unquote, even the word healthy can be like triggering for some people because I used to call them healthy habits in the Thrive framework, and now I call them helpful habits.
Oh, I like
Helpful
that.
habits. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's like exercise, sleep, and nutrition.
Yeah.
Because they are helpful
And
habits.
I will tell everybody listening, if you're also on the fence of the Room to Thrive group, Cheryl gives really good evidence-based research. That's what I really appreciated about your group was how much it matched the research and the science.
Mhm.
Um, but you made it accessible for everybody. You and our group member, like everybody was really aware that we all have different means, we all have different access,
Mhm.
we all have different needs, and what works for me might not work for somebody else. And I just really appreciated that you gave the information and education in such a nonchalant is the word that's coming to mind, like in such a
Yeah.
way that it wasn't prescriptive or you have
Yes.
to do this or you're bad if you don't. It
Yeah.
was presented in a way that really helped everybody start to incorporate what they can. So don't be fearful that you're going to get a whole bunch of prescriptions if you join one of
Yeah.
Cheryl's groups.
No, I almost wonder sometimes. I'm like, I think, oh my gosh, am I not nudging people enough? Because I'm like, oh, maybe I should be more like, you need to do the coaching them like more aggressively. But I'm like, no, like that's the last thing people need is one more person telling them what to do. It's just, I think
Yeah.
it's the same with when I had a baby, like tangent, but this whole fixation people have on rest is best and doing everything best. Like no one does everything best all the time. Nobody does everything best. Okay. So let's not
Yeah.
set ourselves up for failure by saying that we have to have the best diet, the best exercise, the best, just choose from the smattering of things that might help you.
Yeah.
Figure out what moves the needle and then give yourself self-compassion and forgiveness when you're not perfect. So
And what's best for one family might not work for another. And same with
yes.
individuals. So, and what was best for us a year ago might not be best for us today. It's
Mhm.
That's the hard part is it's going to constantly change, but that's also the good part is that it's going to change. You're not going to be if you're in a place where you're stuck right now, you're probably not going to be there forever. It's going to change over time and you're going to learn new skills and new things are going to start to work.
I love that. That's a words of hope. Those are words of hope. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's our words of hope. Those are words of hope. Um,
Yeah.
do you have a totally different note? Do you have a favorite arthritis gadget or tool in your physical toolbox?
Absolutely. This one is, I actually had a conversation about this with a friend recently, just how many heating elements are in my house. So any sort of heating pad or heating thing, I've got a heated eye mask, I've got heating pads, I've got a plushie that's heatable, hand things, feet things, you name it. We've got all the heating things at our house and I love them.
Ugh, me too. I'm like, how are there any more that I haven't bought already? But I just got one that's a battery heated eye mask for yeah. So you don't have to like put it in the microwave or anything. You charge it like you charge your phone, and it's really great for kind of those dry eyes in the morning.
Oh, I
Um,
might have to look into
yes,
that.
Christmas present idea or
Yes.
holiday present idea.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite movie or book or show you have watched
Oh gosh.
recently?
If we dive into this question, it would be another full podcast.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
will just leave you with my favorite show recently has been Agatha All Along. I'm a big Marvel fan. Well, my husband's a big Marvel fan. I kind of jumped on with him. And I love anything witchy and woman-centric. There's also good queer representation in it.
Mhm.
It's really cool. It's a great show. It's on Disney Plus. And Katherine Hahn and Aubrey Plaza are like the two big main names. They're just such great actresses. So, plus all the rest of the cast, whew, so good. I highly recommend it.
1,000%. 1,000%. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite mantra or inspirational saying?
I have a couple.
Mhm.
So my first one is be the good you wish to see in the world.
Mm,
That just kind of reminds me to like get up and get going. But I actually got a sweatshirt either last year or the year before, I forget when, from this company called Self Cares for Everyone. They make sort of, yes, yes, Charles had a
I
few.
have some of their
They
stuff.
make some
Yeah.
like sometimes they're cheeky, sometimes they're just kind of cute little sweatshirts with coping skills or mantras on them. And my favorite one is I'm doing my best. And it's also got
Mm.
little sayings here is like my best is enough. And one says like my best changes every day. And that's been really helpful over the last couple of years going through some ups and downs.
I love that. I have the one that says, "What if it all works out?" Because I always forget to ask
Yep.
myself that. So I wear that, especially when I'm going to the airport, because I get nervous before I fly often.
Oh,
I'm
sure.
like, what if it all works out? Like, what if it's a boring flight? Nothing happens, you know?
Yeah. What if it's just fine?
Yeah. It's like I never consider that. My brain does not want to consider that typically. Um,
Yeah.
what's bringing you joy right now, other than Agatha?
I'll say two things in specific. One has just been different levels of connecting with friends. Um, we really slowed down in the last year, and instead of going out and doing lots of activities, we've done more going over to friends' houses, watching shows, cooking, stuff like that. And I've just had a really good time getting to know our friends on a deeper level because of that. And also the Eagles are on a really good winning streak, and they just won last night, so go Birds.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so yeah,
I love it.
that's creeping into.
I love it. I'm a big Kylie Kelsey fan, Jason Kelsey's
That
wife.
is.
Yeah. So,
Yes, they don't live very far from me. And shout out if Jason or Kelsey, if you're hearing this, um, I would love to go out for a drink with the two of you. You seem like a really cool couple that we would have fun at game night with.
oh my gosh. Yes, I actually have this list. One of my 1 billion ideas of things to do with arthritis is have something called the Arthritis in Culture Awards. I don't
Ooh,
know if you've heard of like Las Culturistas, Matt Rogers and Bowen Yang. They
yeah,
do the Culture Awards every year, and they're just like best movies, best shows, whatever. So I was thinking arthritis in culture. So times that arthritis was mentioned in like pop culture or wherever. And one is Jason Kelsey on his podcast talked about having osteoarthritis. And then it was
yeah,
really funny because he was like, I don't think you can have that in your foot. And then Travis was like, yeah, you can. There's like joints in the foot, dude. And it was just like the most doodly conversation about joints I've ever heard,
yeah,
about arthritis joints, not like joint
yeah.
joints.
Their
So
podcast is one of my favorites.
I love it. I love it. And I'm a huge Swiftie for those who didn't already listen to the
Yeah.
podcast. So that's how that was my entry point.
My
Um,
husband won't, he says he's not as much, he's not a full Swiftie, but he is. I had a Taylor Swift themed birthday party for his 40th. So he's a big Swiftie.
I love
And
it.
we just love the four of them together because we're big Eagles fans already. So yeah. Shout
Yeah.
out to the Kelseys and potential future Kelsey in Taylor Swift. And hopefully
Yeah.
y'all want to be our friends.
Oh my God. Please, please.
Yeah, be our
I just
friends.
had this, I literally just had this like vision that like you're gonna be one of their kids' therapists or counselor, which would be amazing. Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes, I would love that.
That's
I do
amazing.
also have an interest in sports psychology. So yeah, hit me up, people.
Amazing. Last one, big one. What does it mean to you to live a good life and thrive with psoriatic arthritis?
This is like a poking question just because I've got so much up in the air right now. Um, but I think what it means to live a good life is just to be able to live and enjoy all the things and all the different aspects of myself in my life. I like watching sports. I like going out with my friends. I like cooking and trying new recipes. I really, really love working. I don't like how workaholic I can be sometimes, but I know my work's really important and I really enjoy doing it and just connecting with people, hearing and sharing stories. It's just the healing aspect of all of it. Um, so to be able to do the things that make me me in whatever shape or form, I can do them, and have some consistency with that is what means living a good life. And I will be completely transparent with everybody. That's not always possible. I've had to take some steps back, excuse me, in professional spaces with hanging out with friends, with doing the sports or activities that I love, and pivot or find new things. which is totally okay. It's hard. It kind of sucks while you're in the middle of it, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get to do those things. It's just sometimes they have to look different.
Yeah, I love that kind of you're interweaving the concept of adaptability, or flexibility,
Yeah.
being able to pivot and that's so hard, right? If you're the kind of person that wants to plan, like in my case, wants to control,
Yep.
I remember that the talks plural I had with my therapist. Like, what if I'm really good at controlling things, right? Do
I'm
you?
chuckling
Yeah.
because almost everything I say to my clients, my therapist says to me, and then we laugh about it. And yeah, that's it. I mean, the biggest thing, the best way to manage a chronic illness is to get a little bit more comfortable giving up some control. Keyword
Yeah.
there is some. I'm not giving it all up.
No, no,
Never.
realistic goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
You gotta be
I never
realistic
would
with
have
yourself.
that lesson took me like 10 years to learn. Like I never would have agreed with you
I
at
think I'm
first. I
still
would have been
learning
like,
it.
no, you might have to accept some lack of control, but I'm different. I'm
Yeah.
going to figure out the loophole. I'm going to figure it out.
One of the most powerful parts of therapy for me was when um I realized
Oops.
that being a superhero or trying to do it all and control all of it doesn't make it any better. And now that I can kind of laugh about that and be like, haha, I thought I was a superhero. Um, but also recognizing that sometimes we we are like we're
Yeah.
doing so many
Yeah.
things. We are superheroes in a way. It's literally just about, I think you said it earlier, being very conscious about where you give your time and making sure that what you put time and
Yeah.
energy into gives you energy back.
That's so true. That's so true. Well, where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, so the best place would be my social media. I don't have a ton of followers. I'm not an influencer. I literally post pictures of my dog and food. Um,
You
but
influence the people who in your environment, though. That's perfect.
that's fair. I'm ALC724 on Instagram. You probably won't find my Facebook. I've been pretty private on there for a
Hmm.
while. If you're one of my clients hearing this, don't friend me. I probably won't accept your friend request. But I appreciate the support. Um,
Yeah.
Also, folks can check out my therapy website. My practice is ALC Counseling and Therapy .com. And I also am the one of the co-directors of the mental health program at the Welcome Project PA.
Mm,
And our website is welcomeprojectpa.org. I can share all this with Cheryl. We can put it in the
yeah,
notes. Um,
that'd be perfect.
and that's where you can see we do have a chronic illness support group run by two of my amazing interns, Hope and Melanie, who are both actually living with some arthritis. Um,
Ah,
and they're kicking butt in grad school. And they're holding the space for folks. And that group is actually, because it's a peer support group, it's open to everybody from um, anywhere in the country. You don't have to be
that's
in Pennsylvania.
great. That's
For our
great.
therapy services, we are only open to folks in Pennsylvania,
Right,
um,
right.
licensure and stuff. Um, but yeah,
Yes.
that's where you can find us. You can also probably find me um cheering for the Phillies and the Eagles and
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with my dog. If you follow me, you will see lots of pictures of scruffs.
Amazing. No, well, thank you so much. This website is incredible. I'm like having to resist going down the rabbit hole of this website right now, the Welcome Project.
Oh yeah,
But yeah,
we do too much, but we love it.
I know. Really, we're kindred. You and I are kindred spirits here.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you seriously so much for taking the time to share. I just know people listening are gonna have a better picture in their mind of what therapy, could look like, and the importance of so many of the tools in your toolbox. So,
Yeah.
thank you again. And oh, for those listening on the audio version. Don't forget, there are videos of all the episodes now on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel as well. And there's always
Ooh.
transcripts and detailed show notes on the Arthritis Life website, which is arthritis.theenthusiasticlife.com. That's a domain I got like
in 2010 when I first started a blog called The Enthusiastic Life, but now it's arthritis.theenthusiasticlife.com, which is awesome. So
Love that.
thank you again, Amber. We'll see you later, and
Yeah.
go Eagles, even though I'm a Chiefs fan.
That's quite all right. When they don't play each other, I'll let you guys score all the points. When we
Yes.
play each other, we're just gonna kick your butt. Sorry.
I get it. I totally get it. All right. Bye-bye
Yeah.
for now.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Arthritis Life podcast. This episode is brought to you by Rheum to Thrive, an educational program I created from scratch to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. You can go through the pre-recorded course on your own, or you can take the course along with a support group. Learn more at the link in my show notes, or you can always go to www.myarthritislife.net. And if you like this podcast, I would be so honored if you took the time to rate and review it. I also encourage you to share it with anyone you know who might benefit from it. I also wanted to remind you that you can find full transcripts, videos, and detailed show notes with hyperlinks for each episode on my website, www.myarthritislife.net. If you have any ideas for future episodes, or if you want to share your story or wisdom on the podcast, just shoot me an email at info@myarthritislife.net. I can't wait to hear from you.